they're going to take the torch across the finish line. And so women who can align with saying like, I am a change maker, are going to be those that are upset with the status quo, but to the point where they're willing to do something about it, and they're willing to persist in a micro level, because it takes small things done over long periods of time to truly achieve change and impact, that they're going to stick with it even when stuff gets hard. And I think a true change maker is one that is led by, I talk a lot about this in the book, ethics, and then the desire to create impact. When
I
we
like
bring
that.
ethics, yeah, when we bring ethics to the table, which is ironically not talked about enough in business,
Mm-hmm.
how would you treat your family? How would you treat your community? We need to continue to look at that when we're implementing policies, when we're implementing how things are going to run.
Hello, my extraordinary women friends, and Happy New Year. As we kick off this new year, I feel an incredible sense of purpose and passion rising within me. Women's voices, women's wisdom, this is the medicine the earth needs right now. In 2025, it's more important than ever that we raise up our voices, our visibility, and our businesses to create the change we're being called to lead. I'm more committed than ever to my mission of raising up the voices of 1 million women around the world. Women who are ready to stand in their power, share their stories, and make an impact. And today's guest is doing exactly that. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Danaya Wilson, the founder of Better Certify and a passionate advocate for women in the workplace. After 18 years in the male-dominated trades industry, Danaya has seen firsthand the barriers women face, and she's on a mission to break them down. She's the author of Changemakers Wanted and is building a movement to inspire women to rise up, step into their leadership, and create lasting change in their organizations and community. In this episode, we'll explore Danaya's journey, her insights on workplace equity, and how we can all step into the role of changemaker in today's world. Her message aligns so beautifully with my own. It's time to raise up and rise up together. Let's meet Danaya Wilson. Well, welcome to Extraordinary Women Radio, Danaya. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that our mutual acquaintance, Nicole Trick-Steinbach, introduced us. And the more I dug into your profile, I knew exactly why she thought we needed to know each other. You talk about rise up, and I talk about raise up, and it's all about raising up and helping women rise up. And so we just have this passion for helping women change makers. Can you tell us a bit of your story that prompted you to step into this calling for helping raise up women?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that kind of propelled me to move forward with really defining myself as a maker, and then looking to align myself with other change makers, is I had my daughter. So she's 2 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I went through this shift just like a lot of mothers do, but for me it was a really personal one, because and we can kind of get into this a little bit later, but a lot of my trauma came from my childhood, and so I think I avoided being a mom for a long time. And I finally was having this opportunity that I thought I wasn't going to ever get the opportunity to have the benefit of having. And I look at this baby at the time, this daughter, and I'm like, I need to change the trajectory of her life. I need to make
Mm,
it so that there is a pathway that she can become a leader in whatever industry she wants to be a leader in. And it's not so gosh darn hard, because it's
right.
hard right now.
Yeah. So and you came through the world of very male dominated industries. Tell us a bit of that story that brought you to this space in the work. And you've been in your business for about a decade, right?
Yeah, a little bit over. And I like to say that I was almost grown into the industry that I'm into. So my father had three daughters by the time he was 25. And when the hazardous material industry started to get regulated, with like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, was the late 1970s. And they started to approach construction workers, and they were like, do you want to make extra money? That's essentially how they proposed it. And, my dad sitting with three daughters was like, I would love to make extra money. That's exactly what I need. And so, he got into hazardous material and then ended up managing the asbestos program for Denver Public Schools. And I used to go as a child with him to the different schools, as part of the caretaking responsibilities of our family. And he would have me, drop me off at the gym and go and do his own thing. And so I feel like asbestos and managing hazards has been so inherently part of my upbringing, that I almost hesitate to say that I've been in the industry for 18 years because it feels so much longer. But how I got into the industry was I graduated, professionally. I graduated with my undergrad in marketing in 2007. And it was the worst time to get a degree in marketing.
It
As the
certainly was.
as the economy's, somewhat crumbling, and organizations are getting 100 to 300 resumes per open position. I was going on interviews for door-to-door salesmen. I couldn't
Oh,
believe it. I
wow.
was like, is this what my degree earned me? And I was
It's
still living.
interesting because that's when I left the corporate world, was
Okay.
2008. And I was a VP of marketing and branding. I couldn't, I mean, it was like I wasn't finding marketing jobs. There were no marketing jobs. And I always
No.
say that my first blessing was I got laid off, because I found my way into the world of entrepreneurship. And the second blessing was it was 2008 because there were no VP of marketing jobs around, and they were getting, 200-300 resumes for a job.
Yep.
And so I found my pathway into, doing the work that I get to do because of that. So totally get that. Totally understand that.
So you and I, thank you, 2008.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Uh, yeah, so I was still living at home at that time, and my parents were starting up their hazardous material abatement firm. And my dad was like, "Well, why don't you just start to work with us, on the side, write our business plan, get your feet wet." And then lo and behold, I just continued to work with them. I would follow my dad around almost like an eager learning puppy, and wanting to just sponge up everything I possibly could, and not only make a name for myself, but really represent his business, my family's business, in a positive light. And then I just started to see left and right areas that I can make an impact. About 10 years ago, it will be 10 years next year, I started my company, which is Better Certify, and we focus heavily on advancing the trades, particularly when it comes to a compliance or a learning mechanism. We take these antiquated regulations and we breathe a little bit of a fresh air in them and put them into hopefully online or more accessible formats, and then we obtain approvals for those. And it's a long, arduous process, but we're making a pretty big dent in a lot of these industries that we're working in.
Oh, so cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
And what sort of challenges have you run into in these predominantly male industries that has really sparked this interest for your Rise Up movement?
Mm. Um, so I have a story that literally just happened yesterday. I get on this call, and it's a Zoom call, and it's with a couple individuals, and they're talking about how can our organizations partner together, essentially, is the topic. And I was not feeling good yesterday. I don't know why. I
Hmm.
just feel like
Yeah,
sometimes it happens, right?
right. Totally.
And I wasn't feeling good, and I show up. I'm wearing like a sweater, and then I have a hat, a logoed hat for our company. And the guy that I was meeting, one that I've never met with before, was like talking about how he watched a video of me and that I clean up really well. And yeah. And I sat there like almost taken aback, right? Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
why is my image even a topic of this
Yeah.
conversation? It has
Wh-
nothing to do with
what I
this.
look like, right? Exactly.
And this is 2024. This is the stuff that you dealt with. This is the stuff that all the other women around me deal with. And it's still happening. It's
Hmm.
still sitting there like I can't show up with my thoughts, with my presence, if my physical presence isn't something appealing.
Right.
And that happened just yesterday, and I didn't think of this Rise Up movement before that, but I did think of the Rise Up movement before that, but it just reaffirms what I'm here for. I am here to pull the narrative away from that physical presence into it's about what we're trying to do. It's about our impact. The way that I term Rise Up is a way of saying
Right.
do better personally and do better societally. We
Yeah.
don't need to hold women anymore, no longer down to the levels that we've held them to. And I think that the pathway to getting this to go forward and change to really be implemented is through other women.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's we could any woman that I know could go back to dozens and dozens of stories like
Yeah.
yours, and some of them pretty. I mean, I can go back to some stories where we had the senior VP of HR saying some really horrible things of a large multinational organization,
Yeah.
and it's just so rooted so deeply, and so that shift and that change, and not letting that be okay, I think is is
Hmm.
is so important. And like you said, you don't want your daughter to go through this. I don't want my
No.
nieces to live through that. There's all these, we get to make a difference with our voices. And I think that's what we as women can really do, is like, we can change this up. So what is the mission of your organization, of this movement that you're leading?
Yeah. So it's kind of my organization, Better Certified, does something completely different. But what how they intersect is really looking at, so I'm a CEO
Hmm.
and I'm sitting here. I like to learn. I'm a huge learner. That's what we do in my business. We learn everything we possibly can about a hazard or a regulation, and we condense it and then we put it into practical learning modules. Well, I couldn't adequately explain why all of my friends that I went to high school with went and got advanced degrees. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of them did, because we were in advanced placement classes and we're not in the workforce any longer. And I
Yeah.
had to have the actual data, the actual answers. And then from the standpoint of a CEO, what was I going to do on the level of just my organization? And then how was I going to amplify that across a multitude of organizations? And I see that, I listen to a few of your podcasts, and I see that when we're talking about change, I am the I am the visionary. I am the one, the change agent, the visionary, because I have these thoughts and ways to get these big movements to move forward. But what I need right now is women to say, "You're right. I can." One, this is a problem, which is not hard to. Every woman I talk to is like, "Yeah, this is a problem. We do need
Hmm.
a pipeline for future women leaders."
We
And
do.
then two,
We need
yeah,
to have women at the table, right?
absolutely, and make it sustainable. And that's
Right.
the problem, is like, even if we can, I think first it had to do a lot with convincing, right? You were maybe, and you can give me more input on this, but it almost seemed like we just needed to kind of lean in, right? There was a big lean in movement, and it was
Right.
like, if that spot was offered, take it, just lean
Hmm.
into that. And now I feel like a lot of women are getting more opportunity, but we don't have that pipeline for future longevity with the company. And I think that intersects really well with women having children at a later part in their career, or
Yeah.
later part, or older, like myself. I had my daughter at 38. And so what we're seeing is, like, you have your daughter at a later part in your career, so you have a lot of this human capital, and then you have a drop off because it is so unbelievably hard. And so
Yeah.
how
And
do
it's
we?
you definitely see it. You can look at the statistics of that. There's some McKinsey's done some interesting work, and I was part of the Women's
Mhm.
Foundation of Colorado that did a lot of interesting work around this, where you can see, coming out of universities, it's pretty equal coming into lot of the larger companies, men and women. But moving into the leadership levels, what happens is that you have the diminishing number of women who are making it into the leadership roles. And obviously there's big salary discretions as well. It's what is it, 8, I think in
Mhm.
Colorado it's 82 cents on the dollar, which is high. there's a lot of places across the nation that is much lower than that. And I mean, if you're a woman of color, it's really, it's closer to like 56 cents on the dollar, and that those kinds of things are really disappointing. And so it's like, how do we shift this up? How do
Yeah.
we start to change this so that women aren't leaving, they are staying? And I think what I've seen, through, after 2020, where there was the great resignation, and there was so many more women that were leaving than even men leaving the corporate world, because they were just fed up. They're like, this culture is not really working for me, and I am going to go do something different. And for me as a business coach, that's a great thing because they're going and they're starting their own businesses. But it doesn't help us as a society, because women do need to be sitting at those tables.
Yep.
And you can, McKinsey also has some really great stats around how companies who have women at their leadership levels and in the C-suite and on their boards, they perform better financially.
Yep.
And that to me inspires me. It's like, okay, that's the bottom line message that needs to get out there, from the perspective of companies perform better. Their return on investment is higher when there are women in the leadership levels.
Yep.
So to me, that's exciting, but we have lots of work.
It's super exciting. The data is there to support it, right? And
Right,
so
exactly.
we have the data, and then we also have the need. We have, across a lot of sectors, especially mine, like the trades industry, the
Hmm.
construction industry, we are on decades long labor shortages, but yet we're sidelining half of our labor force.
Right.
And so there's this big opportunity, and I think CEOs as well as change makers can lead this and say, okay, if we're looking at workforce development from, why does workforce development start at 18? It really starts at the minute that someone else is caretaking for your children, when they're starting to learn the foundation. So if we look at workforce development to start much earlier than we're commonly looking at it, then that means that we need to start investing in childcare early
Hmm.
and foundationally, and making sure that we have these opportunities for one, women, or the primary caregiver, to be able to re-enter the workforce, and then two, making sure that there's a place that our children can go that's affordable, accessible, and is preparing them to be the future generational leaders.
Yeah, and changing up the conversations. One of my clients is she's in the aerospace and aviation industry,
Mm.
and which has a horrible. It's like less than 3% of women are are in leadership roles in the aerospace and aviation industry, which is just horrible, right? And she talks about, what if we stopped asking girls if they're good at math and started asking them what problems they want to solve? So if we just change that narrative for young
Mhm.
girls really early on, I think that could really, that helps change the trajectory of those young girls' lives. So what inspired you to write your new book, Changemakers Wanted, that's coming out in February in 2025? Um, Tell us a little bit more about your book and what inspired you to write it.
Yeah, so uh I would love to say the timing was perfect, but it wasn't. Anybody who has had a toddler in their house, it is the most impossible time to write a book.
I can't imagine.
Oh man. I tell you, there were many writing sessions, and I'm in the room that I was writing it in my office, and it'd just be like, "Mommy," at the door. And
Hmm.
you're just like, "Oh my gosh." But I think more importantly, my daughter's name is Kaya. Kaya coming into the world reminded me how passionate I am about women's rights, how passionate I am about um, affordable childcare and flexibility to be the center of our employment, or our organizations. And I knew I needed to do something, and I knew I couldn't do it on my own. So I wrote the book, one, because I didn't have all the answers, which I think a lot of times people think, oh, well, you're writing a book because you're the expert of
Mm.
it. And I think that's what my education taught me, is that I write books, I start things to ultimately learn,
Oh, I love that
ultimately
so
grow.
much. Love
Yeah.
it.
Thank you. And and So, and I think that really helps with motivation too, right? Because I don't stop until I can find the solution, right? And so you're constantly kind of digging at something where it's not I'm pulling something out of me, I'm getting something. And it was a very I've never written a book before, and it was a very I enjoyed it a lot. I would love to continue to write, but nevertheless, the reason why I did it is because I needed to come to the table with answers of how my daughter was not going to be sitting there asking, dealing with the same issues that you and I are dealing with when she enters the workforce.
Right.
And how am I also going to pave a way so that her mentors are going to be there, and her mentors are going to be women. How are we going
Right.
to make sure that we have a connectiveness, a collectiveness across all generations? And so a part of that had to be I needed to write a book that appealed to women in managerial positions already,
Mm-hmm.
and something that they would collectively align with and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I am ready to be a part of this. I'm ready
Yeah.
to rise up. I'm ready to lead a group that is going to tackle specific objectives. Are we going to look at what childcare, are we going to say, okay, well, we're a bunch of business owners and we're located in, this city, and we're going to collectively go in on a childcare facility. What are we going to do? And even if it's not as big as that, okay, we're going to agree that we're going to at least provide a 10% stipend. All of these things are possible. It's just we need to be having these conversations with a specific amount of benchmarks and an ultimate goal, and then regular check-ins to make sure that we're continuing to move the needle, because life is heavy, life is hard, and I know we can get it done. It's just we kind of have to continue to push through all the other noise to drive it home.
Yeah, and I love the ideas too. It's like the ideation of
Mhm.
community when you bring women together to look at situations. The ideation that occurs is really powerful. Saying, I'm experiencing this. Are you experiencing this? What could we do differently? And that's how change is made.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Reshma Sujani, she's the CEO of Moms First, and I always love how she says like moms get shit done, and I think that we can even expand that to being like women get shit done. We
Totally.
know how to dig through the trenches and really move forward. And now, so my goal is how do we align that on a level playing field to where our impact is felt on a larger, broader,
Mhm.
um, I don't know the word for it, but
Yeah. No, I like that a lot.
trajectory.
Yeah, exactly. Um, what does it mean to be a change maker in today's world? So when you just like, take that from a macro perspective, what does it mean to be a change maker in today's world? And how can women listening and tuning in right now take this and step into that role as a change maker?
Right, right. So just going down, to the basis of the statement, right? And I was very specific when I picked this title. Um, Change makers, they're going to be the ones that are going to light the fire. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to take the torch across the finish line. And so women who can align with saying like I am a change maker are going to be those that are upset with the status quo, but to the point where they're willing to do something about it, and they're willing to persist in a micro level, because it takes small things done over long periods of time to
Mm-hmm.
truly achieve change and impact, that they're going to stick with it even when stuff gets hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a true change maker is one that is led by, I talk a lot about this in the book, ethics, and then the desire to create impact. And
Mm, I
when we
like
bring
that.
ethics, yeah, when we bring ethics to the table, which is ironically not talked about enough in business,
Mm-hmm.
how would you treat your family? How would you treat your community? We need to continue to look at that when we're implementing policies, when we're implementing how things are going to run. We can't continue in the way that we're, you know, going down the road, because and I always relate this to the built environment. So if you half fast something, if you use products that like asbestos are hazardous, ultimately it's going to catch up with you. And if you
Mhm.
continue to treat your workforce poorly, your people poorly, it's going to catch up to you. And so if you can build your foundations for putting people first, putting people over profits, maybe that means you take less, and maybe your ultimate goal of retirement isn't tomorrow, it might be a little bit longer. That is what our job is as leaders, is to lead ethically and take care of the people around us, especially when they're people that are investing their wholeness into our organizations.
I like it. And when we think about the cultures we're creating in our organizations, that that is a how people live. I mean, they're living in that culture on a day-to-day basis, and it takes intention to shift those cultures when there's broken pieces in there
Yeah.
and bad behaviors that have occurred. And so that intentional shift in doing the right thing ethically, but also just for humanity. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the more we can do, it's like we're people. Everyone in that circle is a person. So how do we really uplift and raise up each person in that circle? So love it so much. What are some examples of women leaders or movements that are doing this rising up, this taking control and reshaping systems that you're seeing that is inspiring you?
Oh man. Okay, so twofold. I do have some, but I will say a lot of me writing the book was to write a book that I needed too.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that I felt like women who were in my situation also needed. So maybe mothers, maybe CEOs. I started when I started getting into a leadership position in my career. It was right after Lean In had been written, and
Mm-hmm.
I felt like that book really encouraged women to take that seat at the table, but then kind of occupy the space. And then the hope was that the support systems around us would help us continue to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing now is those support systems have not moved forward,
Right.
and it has gotten much harder on women. And so I want to say one organization, one leader that is doing really good that I'm watching very closely is Reshma Sujani with Moms First. Now, it's a
Okay.
nonprofit, but they are solely focused on getting women, getting, creating systemic change that's better for women in the workplace.
Yeah.
They're redefining, and I also agree with this, they're redefining childcare as a crucial component of our economic system.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think her work, her strong presence, her good connection has allowed for there to be, I think last year there was the Moms First Summit that they talked about childcare on a broad stage. And then the first, last June, was the first Chamber of Commerce that had an innovation summit, a childcare innovation summit. And I feel like a lot of that organization's work has laid the playing field for these moments. But I would love to see more women standing up and saying, and it's not just about childcare. I think there was two things that I don't think there was two things that I identified in the book that really affected women in whether or not they were going to stay in the workforce or whether or not they were going to take leadership positions, and childcare was one of them. But the other side of it was flexibility, and
Mm-hmm.
it didn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to do with childcare, but it also could deal with a lot of women are talking about uh midlife and looking at menopause and needing more support around that. And so how the study that I was looking at, it was a motherly study, and it said 64% of women want flexibility in their workplace.
Yeah.
And then we're also seeing now an increase of the return to work uh, push,
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
that disproportionately affects women.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Definitely. I think it's really interesting. And I think that making systematic shifts is really what it takes, right? I think you're exactly right. Lean in was like just lean in and do all the things and
yeah,
be a part of the system, and versus like let's change the system. And I think
yep.
that's really, really important. Um, so what's one powerful change you'd love to see in the workplace culture within the next 5 years?
Oh gosh. Okay. One would be, I think that if we're talking about the term of flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
we are using a very antiquated system when we talk about employee compensation.
Mm-hmm.
So, one thing we do right now, if I'm sitting across from you, I'm going to hire you. I already know as the CEO, I already know how much your compensation is going to cost me as an employer.
Mm-hmm.
But your number, let's say you're asking for $100,000, your number may be far different from my number because I'm looking at all of the benefits and the other things that are included in that, maybe taxes, whatever. And so what we need is to completely overhaul our benefit plans so that we have more transparency as well as more negotiation on what benefits actually you want and
Exactly.
what benefits that we can offer. So one thing I explain this with is my husband, I'm on his health plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I decided to not take the health insurance with my employer, let's pretend I had a separate employer, I would lose that money.
Right.
And the employer would realize that. But I was already expecting that as an employer to pay you. So
Right.
what this I created these individualized flexible benefit plans, and what it does is it takes that amount, converts it to a point system so that you're able to spend it in other areas. So you may choose, or I may choose, well, I don't need the money for health insurance, but I would like a stipend for childcare,
Right.
or I would like a gym membership, or I would like a different health vision plan. It's similar to the cafeteria plans,
Mm-hmm.
but the difference is I'm not asking for more money from the employee. What I'm doing is already utilizing what they've been offered. And
Right.
so when we sit across the table, we can talk dollar to dollar and it makes sense. And then
Mm-hmm.
the employee on a granular level can decide what works best for them and then change it annually as needed. And the formula, it gets pretty intense. If anybody reads, it's chapter 7 and it's heavy. It really is. But the if we're if I'm really going to say what do we need to change the world, what do we need to get more women into leadership positions, and what do we need to have more flexibility in our workplace, these plans are exactly it.
I
And if
like
you're
it.
able to get through it and look at what it's doing, you'll have no issue implementing it because it's a holistic approach to benefits.
I like that. I really like that. It's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah. So where can people learn more about you and your book?
I'm most active on LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
And I also have a Substack. I am writing, the Substack is called the Spark, and it's about the Changemaker Collective, and that's where essentially I'm going to be posting things that are going to help from day one to implementation of this entire like shake up, rise up experience. Those are the two best places to reach me, and then my website is danayawilson.com.
Excellent. Excellent. And then the final question I always close with are what are 3 pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave with us today?
Ooh, 3 pearls of wisdom. Okay, change doesn't happen overnight. It's something that we have to give time to, nurturing to, and we need to have a community that supports that change. Um, I shared a story before we got on about my daughter who had a cookie for breakfast today. And so my pearl of wisdom is that sometimes your day just needs to start with a win and something good, and a cookie is not going to be a problem if that's what purpose it's serving.
I love it.
And then my third pearl of wisdom, it's something that guides everything that we do, whether it's in my whether it's being the change maker or whether it's in better certify. What we need to do with the systems that surround us is find out what they're actually trying to do. And then we need
Mm,
to work backwards when we're talking about change. We have to look at what was this originally put in place to do, and then how do we rework the systems to make sure that the goal is still reached, but in a modern approach to how our society thrives.
love it so much. Well, this has really been so insightful. You brought so many good points today, Danaya. Thanks so much for joining us and bringing your wisdom to us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.